Greetings from the mysterious dimension of Paranormal M. I'm responding back to a comment that was written perhaps a week ago. Somebody mentioned that they kept noticing during the reading that I would sometimes stop because I would hear bizarre noise and asked me to share my own ghost stories. Well, here's the deal. You tell me yours, and I'll tell you mine. And I'll also be as bold as to request that you please hit that like button so we can get this video out to more people. Thanks. I saw something my puny brain immediately tried to reject. Have any of you witnessed an unidentified moving object? This happened on the way to EMS class 4 years ago. I've been looking for somewhere to post ever since. I'm hoping to find others who've experienced the same thing. I was driving, my brother was in the passenger seat, reading the assigned chapter for that week out loud. We were coming up on an exit when I saw the thing coming down the eastbound freeway ramp. I have to call it a thing because I've no idea what it was that I saw. It moved so fast. To give an idea how fast, we were about 50 yards away, and I saw it at the same time I heard it zip by. It looked like a ripple, like if you saw a heat distortion but throttling forward. It registered as a momentary blur. I don't have a reference for what I saw, so my brain instantly tried to reject it. It happened so fast I didn't even react, not so much as a what the fuck. I didn't even mention it. I will say this though. Traffic was very heavy, and heavy enough that it seems unlikely no one else saw. I'm baffled that it could maneuver at that speed without colliding with other vehicles. I didn't think about it again until the next time we passed by that exit, but even then I thought about it for maybe a second. When we passed by the exit again about a week later, my brother blindsided me. He said, "Bro, we have to talk about that blur." Apparently, he looked up from his book and saw the same thing I did, but his take was a bit different. He claimed he'd been trying to talk to me about it all week, but every time he tried, his whole, train of thought would derail. His take definitely gave me the creeps, though. He believed that whatever we saw was actually trying to make us forget about it. He also said that he'd practiced saying the phrase, "We have to talk about the blur," several times that day just to make sure that we would talk about it. My best guess is that we saw an alien vehicle. I wish I had more to say on that, but that's all I have. If this has ever happened to you, I'd love to hear about it. This still, in a sense, scares the crap out of me. This happened not too long ago, but I'm writing from how I remember the encounter. I'm 28, female, and always have some type of paranormal thing show up once a week. Vary 3 weeks, and so on. As I write this, I'm in Queens, but I live in the Bronx, visiting family. Anyway, sleeping in my bed. Just to give an idea, my room in the Bronx is like a small to kind of medium-sized place. My room is small, but manageable enough to switch it up. My bed is near the window. The bookshelf is near the wall next to the closet and the door into the hallway leading to the kitchen. I have a dresser near my bed and a bigger dress. I only mention that because sometimes it's also where I see odd things. Anyway, it's been around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning when I felt something going like a crab, moving on top of me in my bed. I wake the heck up thinking it's a family member or a cat, but neither. All I see is a dark shadow of something like a male figure, but a shadow near the less, moving from side to side of the bed. I wanted to move, but I felt like I couldn't for whatever reason. so I just kept my eyes directly at it. It was using its arms like a crab walk on my bed. This happened for a few minutes before I finally woke out of nowhere being able to move, and my half-awake, half-asleep self. I looked all around and went back to sleep. Anyone wondering what that was? I got my guesses. One, it was completely materialized, meaning that it was using a lot of energy. So I couldn't move, which I was beat was fucking purpose to put me in a damn neutral state, but the arms and the body, that does raise questions. I have other experiences, sometimes around the bookshelf where I hear books or small items move, sometimes my dresses where things get knocked into or I hear tapping. The hall basically near the bathroom, where in that experience I heard something in the bathroom. I know because when I am in the dark, it happens, one way or another. But you be the judge of that. Need advice. Urgent, in parentheses. Lately I've been seeing things. I didn't think anything of it till tonight. I constantly hear things moving. Things that shouldn't be moving in my home. I hear walking, other stuff like that. Today, as I was getting ready to leave for school, I saw a strange man in the mirror for a split second before he disappeared. I was kind of shocked, but I forgot about it. I go through my day, and it's time to go to sleep. It's normally really hard for me to fall asleep. Tonight was no different. I tried to fall asleep and started having some weird dreams, nightmares even. I woke up and thought nothing of them. Then I tried to go back to sleep yet again. I had another strange nightmare, and this time the same man I saw in the mirror earlier in the day was there. Needless to say, I was more shaken and frightened. I awoke, ran to the restroom to try to calm myself down. Then I tried to go back to sleep. Now, this is the part that's making me write this post. It's as follows. When I was younger, say in middle school, I used to get sleep paralysis almost every night. Seeing things have never been a part of my sleep paralysis until tonight. I had another nightmare, realized I was half awake and paralyzed, something that hadn't happened in years. But this was different. I was seeing things. That man, all I could do was whimper because I simply couldn't move. I was in shock. And then something else strange happened. Felt something enter my body. Some kind of energy. I don't know how to explain it. My whole body shivered as I felt this, and I was having this vision. It was like nothing I've ever felt before. I got extremely cold and, well, even more frightened. I finally got out of the paralyzed state and tried to make sense of things, but I simply can't. I'm just really in shock. I don't know what to do, so I came here. I just want to know if anybody's ever experienced anything similar and how they dealt with it. Thanks. My house is haunted and is getting worse every day. I will be telling these stories like I would if I write it in a diary. It all started in summer of 2010 when I was 5. My family moved to a rather big city in Switzerland. We live in a block building which was built in 2007, so it was fairly new at the time. Ever since I moved into there, I've been experiencing a lot of activity in my home, which is strange as it was just constructed 2011 to 2014. Every now and then, me and my brother were seeing orbs floating around and transparent people staring at us. I was able to take a picture, which I'm unable to upload as the file's like on a 7-year-old hard drive, which I accidentally dropped, but I try to explain it. It was a picture of a doorway in my home, The door was open, and in the doorway there was someone, a completely white person. No face, no eyes, nothing, just a white flash in the shape of a person. Keep in mind, I didn't use the flash function for the picture. There was a second picture even more scary. I was 7, really bored. My grandma just picked me up from school in her blue Mazda 3. For no reason, took out my 20 FR, $24, MP3 player, which was, had a shitty camera, made a photo of the huge underground garage that we were in. And there was it. At around 7 foot tall, a completely black person. Again, no face or anything except for, eyes. It was standing right in front of my grandma and staring down at her. 2015 to 2018. Me and my brother were seeing a lot of ghosts in the reflection of our windows, especially when studying. But in this time period, nothing more happened. Activities became so rare that I thought the ghosts were gone. 2020 to now. I've been hearing a lot of strange sounds coming from my room. Something even growled at me while I was playing Minecraft on single player. I didn't have my headphone on, so I was trying to listen to my brother who just got called by a call center scammer. And then right behind me, a growl like a werewolf. Still one of the loudest sounds I've ever heard. But I was the only one who heard this. The day before yesterday, 1:15 a.m., midnight. As I'm only 15 years old, I live with my parents, just like any other 15-year-old. So that night I had to take a massive dump. Important note, there's a hallway connecting the kitchen and the bathroom. So, as I just finished taking a dump and washing my hands, my brother, 16 years old, comes bursting into the bathroom and locks the door. He said that he heard a door opening and locked us in so we don't get grounded for staying up so long. But it wasn't my mom, not my grandparents, who live with us, by the way. It was something unexplainable. So 20 minutes have passed. We're still locked in, and I can hear rustling like someone searching my jackets hanging in the same hallway as the bathroom. 30 minutes have passed. I hear footsteps and I'm freaking out. 34 minutes. My brother just unlocked the door and we're trying to make a run for it. Since then, every night I hear footsteps coming from the same room. I need an explanation of what's going on in here. Can't get any sleep from hearing footsteps in the hallway and kitchen. Grew up in a haunted house. I grew up on a farm that was settled by my great-grandfather in the 1800s. To this day, whenever I go back, I, and anyone with me, feel like we're being watched and that we're not welcome. My childhood was filled with terrifying interactions with the paranormal. My closet door would fly open in the middle of the night. My siblings and I would hear banging and voices all night, discuss what we heard in the mornings. On a weekly basis, I would hear this cackling and growling sound getting closer and closer to my bed, eventually hearing it right beside me. Then a feeling like something pushing me into my bed and telling me that it was going to drag me to the pits of hell. I would assume this was sleep paralysis, except for some notable things that happened afterwards. One evening after the threats, I went to my sister's room. My mother was asleep in her bed because she was scared. I walked into her room and a floating head was on her bedpost, turning in circles, making that cackling sound. I went back to my room for a sleepless night. A few nights later, I heard the cackling again, getting closer and closer. I pulled the covers over my head and waited for the inevitable. My sister then screams at the top of her lungs, sending us all running to her room. She had heard the cackling and a ghost of a woman flew into a room right above her bed. Terrifying. I won't get into details unless asked, but we messed around with the Ouija board my parents bought us for some reason, including once when we snuck it into a church, which was the craziest thing I've ever seen. It was like adding fuel to the fire. Eventually, things quieted down after they, got someone in, unsure who, and they determined that there was a portal to hell in the closet. Put some crystals around the house. The house to this day still has that eerie feeling of being watched and the feeling of not being wanted. I've been periodically stalked by entities since. That's ended since I became a Christian. Need help. Shadow figures with eye shine, seen in reflection from my lizard's tank. I don't do drugs or drink, for your information. This is not my first experience with things that have eye shine other than animals. This is not my first time seeing a shadow person. However, this is my first time seeing two shadow people at the same time and with eye shine. This was through my new lizard's tank I just bought yesterday. Needless to say, I flipped out, ran to my parents and brother to come see them. When I came back, they were gone. I was not thinking good at that moment to take a picture or a video. Damn it. But I have this story to share, and I hope someone will at least see this and tell me what the fuck I saw. I just got this new common lizard I saved at work. He or she is both blind in both eyes, and was very dehydrated and hungry. He wouldn't get off my finger the whole day, so my brother just decided to get a tank and keep him. Well, I put its tank together real late last night, and I went to bed. I woke up late for work, but I decided to go ahead and feed and water and check on the little guy. I put my face almost up against the glass to watch him, when on the back of the tank I saw what looked like a shadow moving on the other side of the glass. I ignored it, didn't think anything of it until I saw a quick flash. I tracked it with my eyes and saw it flash a few times, and then it came into focus. I thought I was seeing a cat's reflection on the window that was behind me. Then I could make out a general face shape of what I imagined was a person's face, but it was all smoky shadow. Right where a human's eyes would be were two perfect eye-shine globes. I could tell when it actually looked at me and saw me, it snapped its eyes on me, quickly disappeared from the black glass pane of the tank. That's when the second shadow figure appeared, with its eye shine very bright and clear, almost like it had just walked up. And when it saw me, it started moving its head very, very, very fast back and forth. I couldn't help it. I started following its eye shine with my eyes. That's when it started moving very fast back and forth. When it had my attention, it literally snapped its eyes onto mine, and I could not look away. I didn't flinch or move at all. That's when I freaked out and ran for my family to see. Wanted to see if they could see this too. When I got the shadows were gone along with their eye shine. To me, it almost felt like I was the creature in the tank being watched. Freaky feeling. It's been bothering me all day, and any time I see a reflection anywhere, I'm always looking just in case I can see those things again. The night my grandfather passed. Whenever my grandfather would come into my house, I was 11 at the time, he would wash our dishes simply because he liked to. It gave him something to do. The funny thing about this was that he wasn't very good at washing the dishes. They would always have a soapy taste and a residue on them after he was done. We knew he liked to do it, so we never stopped him, just kind of dealt with it. Moving forward to the night that he died, he passed at 6:20 p.m. The next morning at exactly 6:20 a.m., the dishes crashed. He hadn't been over to our house for quite a few months, since he was hospitalized for a while before his passing. My family all went downstairs and just brushed it off as a coincidence and went back to bed. Well, I woke up at around 9 a.m., freezing cold. I still had the events from 6 a.m. on my mind. I went downstairs and stood right at the sink and just stared at the dishes. All of a sudden, I felt a rush of warmth, starting at my toes and eventually making its way all the way up to my head. I knew he was there with me. I could just feel it. I started to make breakfast, pouring cereal, milk into a bowl, and I couldn't believe it. My cereal tasted soapy. It had to be a sign from him, as he hadn't washed our dishes in months. I know that this isn't something entirely too active, but it has stuck with me to this day and I think about it often, so I figured it was worth sharing. The town is just as haunted as the woods. Part 1. I live in a very small town, right on the edge of a very popular wooded area that attracts a number of paranormal investigators every year. There's been multiple stories of weird things that go on in those woods. Black-eyed girl, pigman, cult activity, weird cemeteries, alien sightings. Most of the locals have witnessed something weird go on in those woods, which has widely been reported. But I wanted to talk about a few experiences I've had from living in the town first. I'll start with the experiences from my parents' house. So my town is an ex-miner community. Most of the town is now built on top of old mines, including my parents' house. My parents' house is, in my opinion, 100% haunted. There's certain parts of the house I won't go into on my own. So let's start from the beginning. We moved into this house back in '99. Little things would happen, like things would go missing and turn up in weird places, but nothing major. But things started to pick up over time. One night, my daddy used to believe there was no such thing as ghosts. He was up late doing paperwork. He heard footsteps on the stairs, thought it was my mom coming down. After they reached the hallway, they stopped. He thought this was a bit odd and was about to get up to see what was going on. That was when his glass of wine slid across the entire dining room table and smashed up against the wall. Another experience my dad had was when he fell asleep on the sofa and said that he was thrown, quote-unquote, across the room. And on top of that, he heard a man's voice tell him to go to bed. Personal experience that I've had in that house include seeing an apparition of some old-style boots walk behind me in the mirror, footsteps and voices heard in the hallway and dining room at night. The whole family's seen things move across tables and the fireplace. The things that creeped me out the most is that we've all seen the face of a man appear in the living room window. The front of my parents' house is a very long driveway, so we know it's not just somebody walking past. We've all seen it, including visitors to our house, and everyone has described it in the same way. The one experience that sticks with me the most is the time I was washing the dishes in the kitchen. It was pitch black outside, but all the kitchen lights were on, and you could see into the hallway. I saw the reflection of what I thought was my dad walking past me. I even felt somebody walk past behind me. Carried on walking into the next room, which is a downstairs toilet. I started talking to him and thought it was a bit rude that he didn't answer me. I then walked into the living room to find my dad sitting there. I asked him why he didn't answer me, and his response was that he hadn't moved from the living room all night. But I know I saw a man walk past me. The room that creeps everyone out, the dining room. This room is an extension onto the house, and there is an archway connecting to the next room. There's something about this room and that archway that unsettles everyone. This is where a lot of the apparition activity has been spotted, including shadows, footsteps, and just a general unsettling feeling. I've always experienced someone tapping on the window from the outside of the dining room while I was home alone. The outside of the window is the garden, which is only accessible through the back door of the house. There's so many experiences that I want to talk about which happened in my hometown. I feel like this could be a few parts. I just want to point out that I've been on a few local ghost hunts and have met a few mediums. They've all said I'm a sensitive, which is apparently someone who isn't psychic, but is apparently able to see and hear more than the average person, which honestly would explain a lot, because I've witnessed a lot of weird things. The town is just as haunted as the woods. Part 2, The Little Girl. I visited my parents' house this evening for dinner, which reminded me of a few more experiences that I'd had in the house which I'd missed out on my last post. So back when I was 18, I worked nights. I came home at 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning with my now fiancé. We used to work together, which is how we met. We were always super quiet in the morning because everybody else would still be in bed. We went straight into the kitchen as usual, clicked on the kettle to make a post-work brew before bed. I also forgot to point out my last post, that the very active dining room is the room attached to the kitchen, so you walk through it to enter the kitchen. Myself and my partner were quietly chatting away when we heard footsteps in the hallway which entered the dining room and abruptly stopped. We both heard as clear as day a woman start laughing. We both whipped our heads around thinking it would be my mom, but obviously there was no one there. Everybody else in the house was still asleep and in bed. The following evening when I woke up, I spoke to my mom about what had happened in the kitchen. She told me that she had also experiencing, just weird things going on in the house that week. At this point, we were used to the spirit of the man that lived in our house. But this was something else. It felt sinister. The following weeks brought some odd activity in the house, and the rest of the household on different occasions heard a little girl skipping and laughing in the hallway. Female whispers and crying could also be heard in the night. My mom went to see a friend after this who's a psychic. She explained to my mom that this little girl had come into contact with her while in the local town. The girl had taken a liking to my mom, decided to follow her home. It was the first time somebody had come to see this psychic about this girl. Apparently she had followed a few people home. We decided to get the house cleansed to send this girl actually home. However, the male spirit that we have nicknamed John still remains in the house to this day. Although the spirit of the girl has now left the house, there's something very unsettling about it being there. That atmosphere at the time changed in the house, and everyone seemed on edge. The town is just as haunted as the woods. Part 3, The School and the Pub. Back in the day, I had a friend who lived next door to the local high school. I stopped over one night and refused to step foot in his house again. Bit of a backstory. The school was built in the early 1900s. Got a lot of history to it. I attended this high school growing up, just like nearly everyone in the town did. There were rumors of it being haunted, but most of the time everybody just put it down to being a stupid story. Ouch. Under the school was a number of tunnels. They were originally built due... Yeah, go. Under the school was a number of tunnels. They were originally built due to the Second World War as safety precautions. The tunnels are still used to this day for storage. The story goes that one of the students was murdered in the tunnels by a group of teenagers. However, I've never really been able to find any truth to this story. So, back to my friend's house. The layout of his house was very strange. It used to be a pub back in the early 1900s. We were upstairs in his room just talking. It was about 1 a.m. and it was just the two of us in the house. All of a sudden, through his bedroom window was a flash of light. This obviously caught our attention, so we peered out the window. Directly out of his window, you could see the assembly hall of the school. For some reason, all the lights were turned on. I looked at him as if to say, "What the fuck's going on?" He said to me, "Just wait, you'll hear the singing in a minute." Lo and behold, we heard muffled singing coming from the hall. Carried on for about a minute and then abruptly stopped, and all the lights switched back off in the school. I asked him what the hell that was, and he replied, "It happens fairly often. I've gotten used to it." We put a film on to calm my nerves as to what had just happened. Around an hour had passed, and we heard footsteps from outside his bedroom door. It went eerily cold in his room. The pacing outside his door continued for just a minute and then stopped. I was terrified at this point, but he didn't look bothered by it at all. I told him to explain to me what on earth was going on. He said to me, "This house is haunted by 5 ghosts. The old lady who walks back and forth in the driveway, who you can see through the kitchen window. She wore a scarf around her head and had a hunched back. The lady with no teeth would just stare at you, smile, then disappear. And the 2 children who could be heard laughing and playing together." He said that he was used to seeing them all, and they were all harmless. He then paused, took a breath, and said, "And there's one that we call the tall man. He was the one outside the door. He would only appear when renovation was being made on the house. He didn't like change, apparently, and he would make that known. Rooms where renovation was taking place would become freezing cold constantly. It didn't matter how warm the rest of that house was. That particular room would be stone cold, and things in the room would get thrown around at night. And someone could be heard pacing and stomping angrily about. The reason he was called the tall man was because of, well, obvious reasons. My friend said he had seen him twice, and he was nearly 7 feet tall. Period clothing, wearing a top hat. After that night, he did say to me that he was unsure why he had made an appearance that night. There was no renovation work taking place after all. At least when I'd stopped there. We both got obsessed with trying to find out the history of that house, but couldn't find anything apart from the fact that it was an old pub. I wouldn't go back to that house after that night, and every time I would walk past the house on my way to school, I would get anxious and refuse to look at it. The town has a number of pubs, 2 of which are from the 1700s and still in use today. These 2 pubs are particularly very haunted. The town is just as haunted as the woods. Part 4. The 4 Crosses. The Cross Keys. The former coaching inn was built way back in 1746. It still stands and functions as a pub today. The infamous local serial killer, William Palmer, who poisoned a number of people. He was said to be a regular, and there's a story of him poisoning one of his possible victims in that pub. The pub is known for cold spots, people's drinks moving, voices and footsteps in the cellar, and numerous accounts of shadow people. William Palmer was eventually caught and was hanged for his crimes. It is his spirit that people believe still haunts the wanders of the pub. Four Crosses. If you've ever been on the hunt for a truly terrifying experience, the Four Crosses is the place to go. Declared as one of the most haunted pubs in Britain, the Four Crosses was built in the 17th century and again is still used as a pub today. There's reports of a round-head soldier from the Civil War who's spotted in the ladies' toilets, as well as a woman called Emily who constantly cries. One of the locals from the early 2000s is said to have never left the pub after he died. A young man in the garage who committed suicide is also still used to be residing there. The most common ghost is that of a little girl, who is seen often in the downstairs bar. People report this as being a black-eyed girl from the local woods, but from my personal experience, it is not her. The Four Crosses hosts ghost hunts on a regular basis, one of which I attended a few years ago. We got started on our night with the usual tour of the building. This is before splitting off into smaller groups. About 6 of us were sitting in one of the bedrooms asking the usual, "If there's anyone here, make yourself known," sort of talk. And after a few minutes, the TV came on in the room and lit the whole room up with a static white noise. This obviously shit us all up. After a few seconds, it switched back off again. Upon investigation, we found the TV wasn't even plugged in. Now there's cows. None of us had a logical explanation as to how this had happened. We moved our investigation into the attic of the building. And just a bit more history for you here. The wood beams in the attic were originally beams taken from a ship, so the wood beams are older than the building itself. This was told to us after a couple of people in my group, myself included, said that we felt a bit of motion sickness. Apparently, it was a regular occurrence in that room. So we got out the Ouija board to see if we could contact anybody. And we did. We started talking to this little girl. She was scared, felt alone. She was trying to find her mother. She spelled out her name to us. Emily. Not the woman who's supposed to, meant to be seen crying. We asked if she was buried in the cemetery across the road. She said yeah. Few people went over to the cemetery and actually found the grave of the little girl named Emily. Throughout the night, we conducted a number of investigations where we heard whispers and creaks and odd noises. As we came to the end of the night, we placed a torch on the table. We asked Emily to turn it on, to which it lit up extremely bright. This was actually caught on video, to see if I can find it. Everyone seems to have a story about the Four Crosses. It's extremely haunted. One of the most active ghost hunts I've been on. It's close to the local woods, but people are unsure if they're connected. The town is just as haunted as the woods. Part 5. Castle Ring. As I edge ever so closer to talking about the infamous woods, I thought I'd talk about one of the oldest locations in the town, which lies just on the edge of Chase Castle Ring. Castle Ring was originally thought to be back in the Iron Age. Although there's no defined date, the area is believed to be over 2,000 years old. Unfortunately, only the perimeter groundwork is there today. During the 12th or 13th century, a hunting lodge was built, the foundations of which are still visible. Rich in history, the small hill fort has a lot of stories behind it, from UFOs to werewolf sightings to the spirit of a nun, and always my own personal experiences of the place. So let's get into it. Back in 2004, A local was driving past the car park that lies at the bottom of the castle ring. This is when he spotted a hair-covered humanoid figure that crosses the road. Shocked by what he was witnessing, he slowed his car down and attempted to take a photo. He was quoted as saying that it was about 7 feet tall with short, shiny dark brown hair, a large head, had eyes that glowed bright red. The spirit of the nun is often seen near Castle Ring where the locals would collect water. I was unable to find her backstory. People are unsure if she drowned here, was murdered, or is just somehow connected to the area. The abandoned windmill that lies just up the road from Castle Ring also has a sad backstory. Local folklore suggested that this windmill was built on an old pagan burial ground, which would suggest why it's so active. 2 children also suffocated in a flour silo, who are still reported to be active in the area to this day. The legend tells of a tall black shadow-like figure that was spotted as the children suffocated, which is probably the same shadow humanoid that was seen back in 2004. Earlier this year, while stuck in lockdown, I decided to take the dog for a walk as part of my daily, allowed out once a day for exercise thing. I hadn't been up to Castle Ring for years, but thought it would make a nice change to my usual walk. It was raining, so I knew hardly anybody would be out. I parked up and noticed my car was the only one there. I didn't think much of it as this year's been a whole load of weird. I started walking around the perimeter on the allocated path. The path dipped into more of an enclosed wooded area. I started to feel very uneasy. I took out my headphones as something didn't feel right. My eyes started darting left and right as I felt like somebody was watching me. My dog, who loves everyone and everything, started snarling and barking at something in the woods. At this point, I decided to go straight back to the car. I picked up the pace and walked back on myself, just constantly looking around. Out of the corner of my eye, something caught my attention. I snapped my head back around to catch what looked like a black shadow darting behind one of the trees. I ran back to my car and drove as quick as I could away from that area. I now remember why I hadn't been up there in years. The last time I was up there myself and a couple of friends witnessed strange-looking lights in the sky. The whole area just made me feel uneasy, and even thinking about it gives me chills. I know I'm not the only one to have experienced weird things go on up there. The town is just as haunted as the woods. Part 6. The Black-Eyed Girl. Thought it was about time I spoke about the woods. Stretching for 30 miles, Canuck Chase truly is a stunning place to go in the day. If you're stupid enough to wander up there in the night, make sure you don't go alone. However, just because you go in the daytime, don't think the light will protect you. The spirits and demonic entities of the chase are known to make an appearance throughout the day. In the 60s, 2 girls between the age of 5 and 6 were murdered. Their bodies were found on part of the chase that is now known as Birch's Valley. This bit of history is important, so keep it in mind. Let's get into it. The most famous spirit that haunts the chase is that of the Black-Eyed Girl. She doesn't appear very often, but when she does, it causes a media storm. Back in 2014, a local was flying his drone over a dense wooded area of the Birch's Valley. It was there he captured what looked like a girl with black eyes floating between the trees. Footage is available on YouTube, by the way. It had just been 30 years since the last sighting of this girl, but no one knows why there was such a long gap in between the sightings. When sightings take place, a piercing scream of a girl can be heard. People flock toward the noise, thinking a child is in danger. No older than 10, the girl is known to stand there with her hands covering her eyes. She will then lower her hands to reveal the coal-black pits that she has for eyes. And within the blink of an eye, she will disappear back into the woods. Every person that's witnessed her is given the same account. She does the same thing over and over, and she'll also only appear in the daytime. So the murders that I was on about at the beginning of this post. Some people believe that the black-eyed girl is the spirit of one of these little girls. It is said that around the time of the murders, another 7-year-old girl went missing, but her body has never been found. And just a bit more to add to this story that's slightly more close to home. Around 15 years ago, my father-in-law was driving back from work. He drove through the Chase, just as many people do every day of their commute. He drove down the very long stretch of road through Birches Valley. He looked in his rearview mirror to see 2 very young girls sitting in the back of his car. He slammed his brakes on, swerved his car, came to a stop, and checked the back seat again. Nothing. The girls had disappeared. He explained to me in much detail that the girls, well, what they looked like, from the color of their hair down to the clothes they were wearing. He is convinced to this day that the spirit of those little girls who were murdered had made their way into his car. The Chase is covered in paranormal activity, from the demonic pigman to the copious amounts of spirits reported to have been seen. I love going up there for the beauty of the area, but it always feels as if I'm being watched. The town is just as haunted as the woods. Part 7. The Pigman. Local folklore talks about a horrendously creepy-looking creature that stalks people of the Chase. Ask a local about the Pigman. They'll smile and tell you the story as if it's just a ghost story to tell children. Ask them to go into depth of Cannock Chase, and you'll see the look of horror that takes over their face. The story goes that a woman who was accused of witchcraft became pregnant. She didn't want to bring shame on her family by having a child out of wedlock, so she went deep into the woods to give birth. That's when her child was born. It was horrendously disfigured, supposedly due to the corruption of her practicing witchcraft. She offered her child up to the woodland in hopes that she would be forgiven for the evil that she had done. It's said that she returned to the village where she soon died from a flu-like illness, taking her secret about her child to the grave with her. A few years later, people started to report a humanoid-like creature that had facial features that resembled a pig. He would watch the children from the village while he stood in the tree line sulking. After a number of children went missing, livestock had just been gruesomely killed, thrown about the farmland. The village soon became abandoned and reclaimed by the woods. Centuries went by when the local scout club was camping over the Chase, close to where the abandoned village was. The scout leader recalled the story of the Pigman. He told the scouts that if they sing a certain song, Pigman would appear. So they all stood around the campfire and summoned Pigman. He's said to have appeared and murdered all of the group apart from one boy. From that day, the Pigman's been known to roam the woods once again. Now, there's absolutely no proof to back this story, which is why a lot of people state it as folklore. However, there's been numerous accounts of people seeing a man that stands on the tree line with unusual facial features. People have gotten close enough to see his demonic mutated face. It's then that he will run, go back off into the tree line, making a blood-curdling high-pitched noise described as a pig squeal. Unusual footprints have been found in the area, yet no one can work out what animal it's meant to belong to. There's been a number of people that report that in the evening, just as the sun is going down, as the chase is quiet and calm, a distant high-pitched pig squeal can be heard from deep in the woods. Kenneck actually has a large number of pagans that live in the area. It's something that's always seemed to have a bit of a part of this town. However, it's a well-known fact that the cults and those who delve in dark witchcraft have practiced on Kenneck Chase. Could the pigman be a result of witchcraft? Or is this entity something else entirely? The town is just as haunted as the woods. The Gaskins murder. I've taken a couple of days away from this, but I think it's about time I get back on another post. This will probably be my last post about the Kenneck Chase. I still have more stories about the chase, but those are more UFO related. Today I wanted to delve into Gaskins Wood. Part of the chase that lies between Hednesford Hills and Kenneck Chase. This small wooded area has a sorrowful backstory. Back in the First World War, a couple lived close to the woodlands. The husband went off to fight, and the wife was left at home. Months later, letters stopped coming. The wife believed her husband had died at war. She moved on and started a relationship with one of her neighbors. She soon fell pregnant. The husband suddenly returned home from war. And upon finding out about his wife being pregnant, he murdered her in a fit of rage. It is said that he dragged her body out into the garden, left her rotting there for 2 days while it snowed. He then took her to the woods where he chopped her up into tiny pieces, scattering her body. Eventually, after she was reported missing, he confessed to his crimes. The police were unable to locate her. The husband agreed to show them where she was. He took them to part of the woods where the water container was, of which he showed the police her head. He had stuffed it between the water container and a pipe. The rest of her body was never found. The woods is named after her murder. Their last name was Gaskin, hence Gaskin's Wood. This part of the woods is a popular area for teenagers to camp, and I spent a number of weekends over there when I was younger. I used to cut through these woods on my way home, and always felt on edge walking through there. Sometimes I would run, though, just to get through the woods quicker. The one night myself and a group of friends camped up there. We were pretty loud that night. We were all just having a laugh, being usual teenagers. As the night drew on, we all eventually retired back to our tents. Around 4 a.m., we were woken by the noise of a woman wailing and crying around the campsite. A couple of us got out of the tent to see what was going on. Nothing. We stood about reassuring each other that we weren't going mad, that we were all hearing it. It was quiet. The air went still. No birds, no rustling of trees from animals, nothing. It was eerie. That's when my friend went pale, his eyes looking straight behind me. He whispered, "What is that?" We turned around to see a woman, battered and bruised, wearing a white nightdress, crying. But the thing that made us all stand there in shock and unable to speak was the fact that we could see right through her. And just like that, she vanished, right in front of us. Safe to say, we quickly packed everything up and were home by 6 a.m. It's been around 10 years since I've stepped foot in that part of the woods. Couldn't pay me to spend a night there again. My great-grand came to say goodbye. Back when I was 13, my great-grand became very poor. She was 93 at this point, and she'd had an amazing life, but unfortunately she was suffering from cancer. At this point, she was in the hospital, and on end-of-life care. We knew she was going to die, and we were trying to make her as comfortable as possible. The one night I woke up suddenly and sat up in bed. I remember seeing my alarm clock and it said 3:04 a.m. At the end of my bed, I saw my great-gran. She was holding hands with my great-granddad, who had died 40 years previously. She was holding a bouquet of flowers in the other hand, and she was smiling. She came to say goodbye. I woke up the next morning thinking about how weird the dream I'd had was and how detailed it was. After brushing this dream off, I went and I spoke to my mom about it. She went pale as I explained in detail what I dreamt about. She told me that she had the exact same dream. She remembered the clock in her room saying 3:03 a.m. My great-great-grandparents were both wearing and doing the exact same thing in both of our dreams. At this moment, the phone rings. It was my granddad. He's been crying, but clearly trying to hold it all together for the sake of the phone call. My great-gran had passed away overnight, 2:57 a.m. To this day, I'm convinced that it wasn't a dream, and in fact, the spirits of my great-grandparents who came and visited myself and my mom, just to say goodbye. Someone living in my house with me. Long, but creepy. The house I grew up in was haunted. There's many stories from all my family, and from the previous homeowners and even the people before them. Well, the house had issues. A lot of people refused to go back after visiting just once. So with that, and just how old it is, no one wanted to buy it when my dad put it up for sale in 2011. In 2014, my fiance and I took it over. Well, apparently during those 3 years that the house was on the market and empty, it wasn't empty. Someone broke in and took up residency. We were both package handlers for UPS in Louisville, Kentucky. This house was in New Albany, which is like 10 or 12 minutes away. That's in Indiana. We both worked a late night shift and rode together. So at 2300 hours, we'd leave the house and get back around 0500 or 0530. Literally the second day we had gone to work after moving in, it happened. We walked in the front door. I went to the bathroom, which was after the kitchen. The kitchen also had a door, but didn't have a deadbolt, just a twisted knob-type lock. I walk in the bathroom and it smells like shit. The faucet's on, and I thought my fiance left it on. I call her to the bathroom and I say, "Hey, what the fuck? Did you leave this on?" The faucet was on, and it wasn't a small drip. It was as if someone were washing their hands. Suddenly I noticed it. After I turned the water off, I'm standing in the doorway of the bathroom. She is standing in front of me, but in the middle of the kitchen, with the kitchen door behind her. The door is wide open, and I somehow don't even notice it. She thought I had opened it to go take out the trash, but when we got home, I went directly to the bathroom. At this point, I told her to get behind me. I unholstered my pistol, 'cause yeah, I carry. I went out back, walked around, saw nothing. I locked the door and went back in and checked the house. Found old food, bottles, shit stains, and it reeked of urine, all upstairs in my sister's old room. 2 days later, we get back from work. The back door is wide open again. This time, I think it was just to get their stuff. I think we almost caught them 2 nights prior, and that's why the faucet was on. What's incredibly creepy, though, is that literally the very next day after work, right across the street from my house, was this homeless person. They were pushing a shopping cart with a blanket and a trash bag. This person had a very creepy mask on, and they were watching the house. When my car light hit them, the person started to move it, but very slowly. I still wonder if they were studying our hours. Didn't matter, though. The same day, I went and bought multiple locks for each door. Something, not someone, verbally threatened me. When I was either 4 or 5, I was alone and asleep in my bedroom. I slept on a bunk bed, but my half-brother only lived with us every other weekend, so he wasn't there. I was completely knocked out. Then I started to wake up, but my eyes remained closed. I remember hearing my heartbeat fading, but with every heartbeat, I saw pulsing black and red. I was trying to completely wake up, but after maybe a minute, I took a huge breath and opened my eyes. It was still dark outside, and I was breathing incredibly heavy. I was sleeping on my side. I was about to raise my head and look at my closet behind me. As a kid, I hated my closet because the door wouldn't close. It would close just enough to leave maybe a 2-inch dark gap. Remember, I'm in my bunk bed, about 5 feet high. The bed is parallel to the wall, and the ladder's on the front of the bed. My head rests right in front of the ladder. My closet is maybe 6 feet away, but along that same wall. So suddenly, I wake up, go to raise my head, turn to look at the closet, make sure it's still as closed as possible. Immediately as I start to turn my head, a voice from directly behind my head says, "Stop, don't turn around." I start to turn my head a little more. The voice then said, "If you look behind you and see along the lines of the wall, you'll be dead and hanging on your back wall." As a stupid 4 or 5-year-old kid, at this point I'm terrified but turn my head really fast to face this voice. And nothing. Got out of bed to turn my TV and light on, and just sat there in terror for the rest of the night. It's been 21 or 22 years, and I still see it so clearly. My small experiences yet to stop. So it was end of afternoon, I believe. I went to the basement, which was accessible from the outside instead of the inside. There was a single bulb, which can be turned on after a set of stairs with a rope or a cord. This basement was mainly empty, made of a concrete floor with wooden walls. There was this one couch. This couch projected a shadow because of the light, but suddenly when I looked, another shadow appeared. This shadow was the figure of a man. It was a figure on the floor, like if something was standing there, but obviously nothing was. I was scared, but it gets worse. It started running toward me. Have you ever had a shadow run toward you? Because I see nothing. I'm on the stairs. I have a door which is easily blocked by anything. I'd almost bash the door for it to open, which I always hated the basement. Never went again. Each time I left my house, there was also a garage. It wasn't ours, but was right next to our property. My friend's dad owned the garage. There was a glassless window, in which was always pitch black, even in daytime. From this window, you could hear something. My name is Zachary, and every time I would walk past it, I heard Zach, 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 Zach in the wind. Not just once, many, many times. And today is not any better. Lately, I've done a spirit box session, which I received answers to, but very clear. So that's to take it very lightly. What did I do in a session? Well, I'm chilling in bed, and occasionally, once every 3 weeks or so, I'll feel something. Like a person climb on my bed. Not just a little weight, no. The bed literally feels and also makes the sound of someone laying down on it. It happened to me approximately 4 times. There was also this time when me and my sister were home, but my parents were gone for a while. And we both at the same time started to feel chills, started to feel worried. My sister also mentioned that she heard the first night "Get out." I've seen shadows in my room, but not a lot of them, only 2 since we're here. So it could be anything. The Girl in the Cemetery. When I was 17, I'm 24 now, I visited a cemetery at night with a small group of friends. We were just going to look at the graves, give a little love to the graves that looked like maybe no one visited them anymore, maybe because they were from so long ago. We were not going there to hurt anything or mess around with the graves because we were, well, most of us still are, very spiritual, otherwise known as not religious. I'd always liked cemeteries, and I feel kind of at peace when I'm in one, so I was very comfortable there and relaxed. I think that may be why what happened at all. I was following near the back of the group, lingering on some graves to read. Seeing what was written, that's when everything for me goes blank. The rest of what happens is what my friends told me about hours later. "This one's mine," I called to the next nearest person in my group. He turned around to laugh and tell me to quit playing around when he stopped. I shouldn't have died, really. It wasn't my fault. "What do you mean?" he asked, getting my other friends to stop and walk back to me. "Well, you see, I was playing in the barn with the kittens and a man came in with a gun and bang!" I don't think they would have believed I wasn't the one speaking if the voice, well, hadn't been so much different pitch and had a very, very country accent. I don't know why he did it. He's my daddy's best friend. For the next 2 hours, I led them around the cemetery pointing at graves and telling them about the people buried there like I knew them. One of my friends had her phone out, used as a flashlight and record everything I was saying so they could face check when we went back to the house that we were staying at. Eventually I stopped again, frowning at a headstone. "This is my brother. Got to live a long, long life. It's not fair. I want to live too." This is what I said, and I stopped my foot before just collapsing on the ground. I didn't wake up until I got home that night. I remember I had the worst headache of my whole life. My friend showed me the video. Then we all looked up as much as we could on the internet to see if I'd been right. I was right about everything except one thing. The grave I'd collapsed on top of hadn't been the brother of the girl who had supposedly possessed me. He had been the son of her father's best friend, the same best friend who said that she had shot her. Never been back to that cemetery since. I'm afraid if a little girl won't be the one to possess me this time. New house. Both me and my brother experienced this. I was around 6 or so. My brother was about 10. We had just moved to a council flat where the previous tenant had passed away from old age. So this was like 1997. Before we moved in, my parents got everything in the house sorted, furniture and such put into place. Me and my brother shared a room, and on the first night when we were asleep is when we had our first paranormal experience. I won't say ghost, because the way this ends may say otherwise. About 2 in the morning, we both woke up to our TV bedroom flickering on and off to static. The main light in the room flickered, and the furniture, cupboards, and drawers opening and closing. This wasn't quiet at all. We were both so startled and scared and genuinely screaming for our parents. After about 15 seconds or so of no response from them, we ran out of the room to our parents' room. We found them in bed. The weird thing was the cold. We were pushing them and screaming right next to them, but they didn't wake up. They were both so cold. The last thing I remember of that night was looking to the hallway through my parents' bedroom door. There was just white light. That was it. My brother can't remember looking through the door, so it seemed only I could see the light. Me and my brother then woke up from our beds at around 8 a.m. in the morning or so. That's after my brother woke up in a panicked state. Looking at each other, and we talked about it. As we talked about it, we knew it happened. We ran to our parents' room again and woke them up to tell them what happened while crying out of fear. We never did find out what happened or what was the cause. We stayed at my grandma's house for a week or so before going back and having no real problems. At least, not to that scale. My dad was a huge skeptic of the paranormal, but even he experienced the weird footsteps in the hall on occasion, the weird figure in the front of the bathroom door at the end of the hallway. We were and still are a poor family with health problems, especially on my mom's side. So there wasn't so much we could do. It never bothered us much other than the weird sounds and the sights every so often. This still happens to this day for them. I've since moved out with a friend. Me and my brother are still adamant on what happened that first night, but we still don't know what happened in the end, or how we ended up back in bed. This may be a ghost story, or for all we know, an alien abduction. We have no clues and no ways to find out. They just walked into the door and disappeared. My parents were both born in Poland, but they met and had children in Canada. My mom's house was out in the farmlands, but my dad's house was in a small town with a huge amount of history, Sandomierz. The house he grew up in was a small house to begin with, but throughout had so many additions that it now resembles a small mansion. The house is also very poorly insulated, so the stairwell, the basement, the attic, and all the hallways were usually freezing cold in the winter. Only the bedrooms have a radiator in them to maintain heat. The house has 3 main floors that are often used, and an attic with a fireplace in it. An attic? Anyway, it really is a beautiful house. I always visited in the summertime, and my sister and I slept on the top floor, just below the attic, which was empty during the summer, since my grandparents rented the floor out to students during the school months. I usually spent my summers there with my sister, but with her own schooling getting more demanding with age, we tended to stop visiting as often, spent our summers in Canada. I signed up for a teaching retreat when I was 18, which would give me all of my required volunteer hours for high school. I took an extra year of high school. I would get to go to Poland to teach English to students in Krakow. I would spend 1 week in my dad's hometown visiting my grandparents, then drive out to Krakow the next day the retreat started. So I was given the top floor to sleep in, alone in a very big, cold house. You may remember how I mentioned I have a friendly and lonely presence following me around. Well, I was there and I didn't feel them. I felt strangely alone, or being watched in a cold way. The day of the retreat, I woke up and showered. Then after putting my clothes on, I turned the open door. This bathroom door is one of those fogged glass windows at eye level. You can't see anything really other than shapes and shadows through it. You know the kind. I reach for the handle, and before I get a hold of it, I see a tall figure approach quickly. Not taking steps, but just getting closer without bobbing up and down. It's an old house, so I wouldn't be able to hear footsteps. I didn't. Then the door rattles with a loud bang and the figure's gone. Now this happened really fast, all within the second of me grabbing for the handle and looking up through the window when I saw the figure. I thought maybe my dad's fucking with me. We usually play stupid pranks on each other. So I opened the door quickly, ready to catch him. Nothing. Nobody. Not even footsteps running away. Just a really weird feeling of confidence in the air. Not my confidence. Still trying to find a rational explanation for this, I walk over to the stairwell thinking, maybe he's just that fast. And I hear him mid-conversation with my 90-year-old grandparents. All the other people in the house in the middle of the, heated conversation. Most Polish conversations are, by the way. Starting to feel like my brain was short-circuiting because this just didn't make sense. I ran through all the rooms, checking every curtain, window, closet. Maybe somebody broke in. Maybe a bird flew through the window and into the house, even though the windows were closed and it was clearly human in shape. Anything to not believe it, because it really just felt unfamiliar and sinister. I later learned from the neighborhood that the entire neighborhood was built on top of a very old and demolished graveyard. There is a friendly woman presence, and it used to try to play tricks on me, but now just hangs out with me. My mom's house always felt a little bit off. Not in a necessarily unsettling way, but in the way you never felt like you were alone. I've always been the silent and more observant type, so maybe that's why she targeted me out of my family. Never had a real definite feeling for her at first. Just this, someone staring at me right now kind of a feeling, which always forced me to push my back up against a wall in the living room and stare out at all the house. One time a bird flew into the window as I was doing this, but that could have nothing to do with it, right? It really started to get bad after I watched Paranormal Activity, the first one. I feel like she follows me around and feeds off my emotions. I saw this movie at my sister's boyfriend's house. Couldn't sleep that night when I got back home because I felt that feeling like your friend's gonna jump at you just around the corner. You just don't know when. Well, I exited my bedroom the next morning to find everybody had left, and I was home alone. Wanted to go to the bathroom, but then suddenly heard one of the metal kitchen chairs sliding against the stone floor in the kitchen downstairs. I stopped and called out to my family again. No one answered. I went downstairs, only 3 steps. It's a small house. I saw one of the chairs slide back and make the same noises as I heard from my bedroom, that metal against stone sound. Nobody was there. Doubled back into my bedroom, blocked the door with my body weight, sat there until my parents came home, then rushed out to use the bathroom. After I moved out, that's when I felt her following me. That's also when I felt her getting closer to me, and when I started to sense that she was also a woman. She started sliding things across tables and misplacing things. I'd leave my phone on the table in front of the couch, not get up at all, then reach back for it, and poof, it's gone. I'd throw the couch apart thinking it's behind the cushions, checking the kitchen and the bathroom, even threw the sheets off the bed, thinking maybe I sat down there for a bit and forgot. I returned to the couch with my hands in my hair. There it fucking is, sitting right on the center of one of the couch cushions. I just threw apart looking for it. At that point, I just yelled out, "Look, if you want to stay here, don't bother disturb me, don't hurt me. You can stay here, only if you kind of keep to myself and you keep to yourself," or something along those lines. After that point, things I know I lost like years ago would turn up in cabinets. Didn't even have at the time that I lost them, too. Didn't hear footsteps around me anymore, and my cat stopped staring at the corners and yowling. I still feel her watching. I know she's following me. But I kind of like her now. But I can't stop thinking maybe she's, just waiting for something. Anybody who's still hearing my voice, just wanted to let you know that I appreciate you. Good afternoon, good evening, or good night. See ya.